First one is Aumasson.
Hello. So I think it was in September. I was at the ZK8 conference in Amsterdam, and I bumped into Awa during the break. And I think Philip was there, or Hadrian, and we're like, okay, wow, you're in Switzerland. There's so many crypto people, the crypto valley. And you're like, okay, I'm sitting here. Okay. But you can see the slide, the guys here. And we were saying, okay, it would be great to have a conference in Switzerland somehow. And I thought that might be the end of it. But like 1 month later, she texted us with like, the website and the program, and like, oh shit, she actually did it in such a short time. So congrats to Awa and all the team for this very nice work. So let me start. Too much crypto, number 2, because there was a number 1 before. Okay. So you may have followed the news in Switzerland. They published this 2 or 3 days ago. Maßnahmen für den Fall einer Stromanlage gehen in Vernehmlassung. C'est la mise en consultation des mesures préventives en cas de pénurie d'électricité. So, Switzerland are very good at preventing disasters. So what it says is they have some measures in case, the situation evolves in an unfavorable way, energy-wise. And there are a few measures, restrict the usage of 4K streaming, don't charge your phone all the time, don't use an electric car or whatnot. But there's something missing from their list of measures. That's the details here. If you look at the list of things, well, there's no mining, proof of work. They don't say anything about crypto. And even if you forget about proof of work, general data center usage, among all the stuff that data centers are computing, there's a lot of crypto being signature, encryption, hashing, and whatnot, and ZK proofs and circuits. So let's try to make the world a better place, yada yada, and use less energy. So in 2019, I spent part of my vacations working on a paper called Too Much Crypto that ended up being accepted and presented in New York at the Real World Crypto Conference. And I will start by giving a summary of this paper. And I'm not going to file a complaint against Awa for trademark violation. That's fair use. So this bothers me, the thing. So the summary of this paper is that symmetric crypto is doing too much computation, too many XORs, too many yards, too many stuff. And it could achieve the same level of security. So it could be secure enough with way fewer operations and therefore way less energy. And it would also be, as a byproduct, of course, much faster. So why? Because the algorithms are over-designed as we use them. You probably know how these work, block cipher, stream cipher. You have rounds, you repeat the same rounds, and then you're done. The question is, how many rounds should you use? If you're a designer, you create a cipher, you're going to put a lot of rounds initially because you don't really know what you're doing. Your cipher hasn't been evaluated by anyone, and you don't want, the public shaming of having your cipher broken 2 days after you publish it. So you put tons of rounds. And then, if it's not broken, you're not going to reduce the number of rounds. And that's the problem. So if you look at the NIST standardization processes, there is no way to adjust the number of rounds after the competition is done, the SHA-3 competition, even the post-quantum competition. And the trend is to increase and not decrease the number of rounds. And it's also, from my perspective, bad risk thinking from cryptographers who think that security is only about cryptographic algorithms and not about all the rest in a security system. So concretely, if you look at the AES block cipher, Blake2B, CHA-20, SHA-3, that's the ratio of the number of rounds broken as defined by academics. So let's say you have a key of 500 bits. If I find an attack that recovers the key in 2 to the power 498 operations, then your cipher is broken. And that's how it is. So 75% for AES, well, a bit less than 25% for Blake2B. Now, if you look if we look at practically broken rounds, so attack that can, realistically be carried out, start and finished, it's much lower, half of the AES rounds, so 5 out of 10. For Blake 2B, the ratio is even lower. For Cha-Cha-20, it's maybe 4 or 5 out of 20 rounds. So there's a large security margin, as we call it. And people say, yeah, but Bruce Nair, the security guru, he once woke up in the morning and he said, attacks only get better, never worse. Actually not true. I found an attack on Cha-Cha-20 at some point, and then people spotted a mistake. It gets worse. But if we look at AES, in 2000, the best attack was complexity 2 to the 155. 13 years later, the state of the art was 2 to the 99. And then people published an improvement in 2018 where they reduced the amount of data and memory, but the time complexity is, ludicrous. Attacks don't get better, and as of today, it hasn't gotten better than this. Look at Cha-Cha, it's pretty much the same. 2028, we did this paper, 2 to the 248 instead of 2 to the 156. And, like a 1,000-fold improvement over 8 years. And as of today, it's the best result, give or take 1 or 2 exponent units. So attacks don't get better, it's because we found the best attack and that's it. And in, the real world, so you're probably familiar with these measures, but just to give you an idea, yesterday, I think with Lucas, we were joking that people found an attack with complexity 2 to the 300 operation, and if each operation takes the time of a Planck unit of time, so the Planck unit of time is the smallest unit in which you can, quantize time, then it would still take 2 to the 184 operations, seconds. So, these attacks are completely bonkers. Never going to implement an attack with 2 to the 200 operations. So even 100 bits are going to be pretty aggressive. Some academics will hate me for that. They will be like, no, JP, you're not publishing anymore, you're getting senile and crazy. But no, in reality, my job is not just cryptography now, it's to protect information systems. And there's many other ways to compromise system if you have 2 to the 100 computing power and time and budget and cost and people and whatnot. So yeah, my proposal back then at Real World Crypto was to reduce number of rounds down to from 10, 12, 14 to 9, 10, 11, and so on and so on. And as of today, I haven't changed my estimates. I would maybe be even more aggressive. So did NIST say, oh yeah, JP, you're right, we're going to change the 10 standards? Of course not. You cannot modify standard because it's a standard. But Cha-Cha-8 is used by more and more people. But some people still use Cha-Cha-20, for example, in the Linux kernel. They're adding some new features, some new kind of userland PRNG. And I was arguing with Jason about this 2 days ago. Like, why did you pick Cha-Cha-20? He was like, JP, I will have to do a lot of explaining with the LKLM people if I don't. Like, okay, fair enough. And we have published Blake 3, which is doing only 7 rounds of Blake 2. And it's, much faster than the rest because it makes way fewer crypto operations. It made some people nervous, but, at the end of the day, I'm like, guys, POC GTFO, if you're just like, yeah, it makes me feel nervous. Yeah, I'm sorry for you, but there hasn't been any evidence that this was too few rounds. Okay, now back to blockchain, back to ZK stuff. There's too much crypto and too much computation generally in blockchains, as we know. Proof of work. How many of you recognize this meme? Yeah, man, you are too young for Seinfeld. So aside from the proof of work, there's a scalability problem whereby we don't want to recompute the same contract every time. So we have invented the idea of rollup, optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. So now that we have ZK rollups, are we done with the problem of recomputation, of doing too much computation? No, because now we're going to look at the problem of doing too much crypto in ZK rollups and ZK in general. So what did I put in this slide? Yes. So initially people, just I think when Zcash started doing their stuff a few years ago, they had only SHA-256. So they did a circuit out of SHA-256. And then people published things like Poseidon, so ZK-friendly hash functions that work on field elements as opposed to field elements that happen to be GF2 only, or an extension of it. So, I mean, I don't understand people that don't believe, because sometimes you use the word believe. I don't believe that ZK-friendly, that arithmetic, algebraic hash functions are safe. Well, they have nothing, very different from the other ones. They just use different finite fields, and they apply the same design paradigms, and the same attack, the very same attacks, can be applied to things like Poseidon, Rescue, you name it, than SHA-2 or Blake 2. So there's no big reason. You might argue, yeah, but what about grammar bases and algebraic attacks? That's a difference, but I think we have a good enough understanding to be comfortable with the security here. And also there are situations where we need to hash stuff. We don't really know why, but we need to hash, take a big object and turn it into a small fixed size fingerprint. So we take a cryptographic hash function, but sometimes we don't really know what we're doing. We just feel like it's secure enough. We don't know if we need a PRF, a universal hash. We're like, okay, let's take SHA-3 Poseidon, it's going to do the trick. But if you look at certain systems, sometimes just using a universal hash would be enough. And I know some projects already did that optimization. Because universal hash, they will be much faster than a full-blown crypto hash. And now, let's say you have your ZK-friendly hash, something like Poseidon or something else, and you implement it from the paper, but you still want to make some optimizations because you feel like, okay, my use case is very specific. I always hash the same type of object. I always hash the same series of objects, maybe in my Fiat-Shamir transform. I know in advance the size of the things I'm going to hash. So what about getting rid of the stuff we don't need? Because small changes in your hash function might lead to considerable improvements in the circuit size, in the evaluation size, in the proof generation size. So yeah, especially given that you have hash functions pretty much everywhere. So, Merkle trees all over the place, commitment, PRF, Fiat-Shamir. So what we thought about doing is eliminate or reduce things that we don't need in some ZK-friendly hash functions. So for example, the padding. Padding is stupid sometimes if you need to encode a type of object, encode its size. At the end of the day, you count one field element for each of those, and you count the overhead in terms of additional gates or constraints. It's not always negligible. Yeah, that's pretty much what I said before. Try to optimize your hash for fixed length input, or at least for input where you know the size in advance. So we did this small project with Dmitry Kovatovich and Portu from Filecoin. It's called SAFE, Sponge API for Field Elements. So really, it's not amazing. It's not rocket science. We just took the Sponge design as it was implemented and optimized it out and get it implemented and design an alternative to the padding to give you the same security, the same provable security guarantees. And we even have a proof in this paper, which we submitted to Real World Crypto, so it may or may not be accepted, but it will end up on ePrint at some point. So I think that's it. I have 6 minutes left to, yeah. What about crypto? Well, don't really have an optimistic look at, because, I mean, in 50 years, we're still going to use AES with all these rounds. I can tell a story. SHA-3, you know why SHA-3 has 24 rounds and not 18? Who knows why? No. So it was in 2009. In 2009, there was the FSC, the chess workshop in Lausanne, where I live. And there was a RAM session, this kind of lining talk session where we present silly stuff and conference announcement and bad jokes. And I had an idea of an attack, quotation marks. And the idea was to make an attack on the Ketsak permutation, where ideally the attack would have taken 2 to the power 1024 operations. And I reduced the cost to 2 to the 800 operations. Wow. And I called it the zero-sum attack, because the idea was very stupid. Just make a high-order differential and exploit the fact that the degree of the permutation, or at least half of it, is bounded just because of the inner structure of the permutation. And I presented it, I was not really taking this seriously at the RAM session, and then people were like, that's an interesting line of research. And then 2 things happened. The Ketsak guys, they were like, oh shit, maybe people will call Ketsak broken because of JP's stupid attack. So at the round 2 of the SHA-3 competition, they increased the number of rounds from 18 to 24. I'm like, okay, I didn't ask for it. Well, I had a conflict of interest because I submitted Blake, which was competing with Ketsak. And what also, left me completely puzzled is that people took this idea and made a PhD or papers about it and optimized the attack, of course. So yeah, I'm the one to blame if SHA-3 has too many rounds. So I'm, try to. Yes, and one interesting point, if you look at Chacha versus AES, so as I showed before, the overhead, the too much crypto-ness is higher in Chacha because you do 20 rounds, whereas you could get away with 7 or 8. And AES, the difference, the delta is maybe 3 rounds top. But if you don't have to stick to a standard, I would say use Chacha 8 or Blake 3. But don't blame me if it doesn't turn out well. And the great thing is that in the ZK ecosystem, we are not bothered too much by standards yet, or by interoperability. It's mostly a greenfield. So we have the chance to choose whatever primitive we want and whatever number of rounds we want, and that people can get creative. So yeah, please don't use SHA-2 in your ZK circuits, and don't use Chacha with 20 rounds, unless you want to see the world burn. But so yeah, 2 minutes left, but I will give my 2 minutes to the next speaker. So thank you, everyone, and I will be around.